Good evening, everyone, for the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force. Fortunately, Supervisor Stewart is not able to help kick this meeting off tonight. He is at the public hearing, the board meeting, which there's a case before the board this evening. Happens to be a Mount Vernon District case. So he is smack in the middle of that, so he's unable to break away briefly to give some open comments. So without further ado, we're going to dive straight into this meeting. And I have a passage here that I need to read for the purpose of this meeting. So bear with me, please. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance of the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so again, I ask that you in advance be patient with us. First, because of the member of the task force is participating in this meeting from separate locations, we must verify that a quorum of members participating and each member's voice is clear, audible, and an appropriate volume for all other members. Accordingly, I am going to conduct a roll call and ask each task force member participating in the meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay attention, close attention, to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. So the roll call. Commissioner Tim Sargent.
Commissioner Sargent is here at the Mount Vernon Supervisor's Office.
Hillary Clausen.
This is Hillary Clausen. I'm at Lorton, Virginia.
Gretchen Waltz. Gretchen Waltz. David Levine.
Yes, hi. This is David Levine. I'm in Chincoteague, Virginia.
Holly Doherty.
Hi, this is Holly Doherty, and I'm at home.
Holly Doherty.
This is Holly Doherty, and I'm at home. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Thank you. Evan Kaufman.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Evan Kaufman, and I'm participating from Richmond, Virginia.
Mary Payton. Mary Payton. Queenie Cox. Queenie Cox. Ellen Young.
Yes, this is Ellen Young. I am at home in Alexandria.
Hamid Manur. Hamid Manur. Lynn Pascal. Lynn Pascal.
Who's here?
Just saw Lynn. Haven't Lynn?
Can you hear me? I was muted. I'm sorry. It's Lynn Pascal. I'm here in Montebello.
Thank you, Lynn. Tracy Wood.
This is Tracy Wood. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I'm
And
in
Walter
my
Clark.
home in Alexandria, Virginia.
Thank you, Tracy. And Walter Clark here at Mount Vernon District Supervisor's Office. Thank you, everyone.
Walter, we might want to double check that Queenie and I believe one additional member. I think it was. Well, let's just start with Queenie. I believe that she was on the call and.
Queenie is here. Hello. Hello.
We can hear you, Queenie.
Oh, okay.
just be sure to hit the red mute button to make sure that we can hear you.
Where's the red mute button?
Hover over your screen. There, you'll see.
Oh, on the screen. Oh, I was looking on my computer. Sorry.
All good.
All right, thanks, Queenie. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the co-chairman so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force.
The motion has been made. Do I hear a second from a task force member?
Second.
And who is that by?
It's Pasco. I'm sorry. Second.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Motion has been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes.
And second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels its emergency procedures and the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged the public access of this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for public and to physically attend any such meetings, and that such FOIA usual procedures which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through dedicated video and audio conferencing lines, and the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the task and nomination page of SSPA website at www.fairfaxcounty.gov/planning-development/amendment/track-nomination, or by calling 1-408-418-9388 or TTY 711 and entering the access code 129-486-0494. It is so moved.
The motion has been made. Do I hear a second from a member of the task force?
This is Ellen Young. I'll second.
Okay, there is a motion made and a second. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, hearing no opposition, the motion passes.
And finally, it is next required that all the matters addressed in today's agenda must address the emergency itself and necessary for the continuity in the Fairfax County government, and or the statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and discharge of the Mount Vernon District SSPA Task Force lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
The motion has been made. Do we hear a second from the task force member?
Tracy seconds.
Thank you, Tracy. The motion has been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. Thank you.
And Mr. Co-Chairman and task force members, I also note that public comments, written comments have been provided in advance. And I will now turn this over to our WebEx instructions. Mr. Graham Owen.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Just one, before I get into that, I believe that we didn't establish that Gretchen Walsall was able to hear us. So I just wanted to, I see her in the meeting, so I just wanted to make sure that she can hear us. I'm going to unmute her now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, thank you, Graham.
All right. So I wanted to provide the task force and members of the public with some instructions on the WebEx platform before we get into tonight's presentation. So for any attendees who are not familiar with WebEx, it's similar to many of the other video conferencing services that you may be using recently. There's some pretty basic controls that I'll go over. If you hover your mouse's cursor over the center of the screen, you should see some icons that will pop up at the bottom of the video. The circle far left is the mute button that turns red when you're muted and black when you're unmuted. The circle next to that is for toggling your video camera on and off. This is for presenters on the task force and nominators. The button next to that, which looks like a silhouette of a person with 3 bars at the bottom, opens up the participant menu. This is important for both participants and for attendees. Once you click on this, it should open a window at the far right side that has a list of participants. And then at the bottom right-hand corner of this window, you should see a small button that looks like a hand on it. This activates the raise hand function. So for our task force members, we ask that if you use that you should raise your hand using this function if you have a question or a comment, and then wait to be recognized by one of the co-chairs, and then unmute yourself to ask your question or make the comment. And then remute yourself. And this is important as we try to ensure that audio connections and everybody can hear properly. Please be sure to remute yourself and press the icon again to lower your hand and make sure that you're off mute. For members of the public that are attending, the raise hand function will also be how you can participate during the Q&A session for the public during the meeting. So please use this button to raise your hand. As to speak, you will hear a series of beeps, which will mean that you are unmuted. You can then ask your question or make your comment, but please be sure to click on the icon once more to lower your hand. If you're calling in by phone, you can participate by dialing *3 on your dial pad. This will alert us that you have a question or you'd like to speak, and we can unmute you when it's your turn to speak. So for members of the task force, once again, just make sure that your microphones are muted unless you're the active speaker, just to minimize background noise, feedback, and echoes. One final thing, that there is one more circle that looks like a speech bubble next to the participant button. This is what we call the chat function. And if you click on that and open the chat window, this will allow you to send a chat message to other panelists or to all the people that are in attendance today. We'd like to encourage people to use this function if they're running into technical problems or if they have specific questions. If you have any questions that are more technical in nature, just message me, Graham Owen from the Department of Planning and Development, and I can assist you. The chat function will only be used to monitor and troubleshoot technical questions and issues. So related to the nominations, please raise those at the appropriate time by using the hand raise feature. That's it.
All right. So moving right along, Aaron, I believe we move next to the 2019 South County SSPA process and overview.
And Graham, I need you to make me the presenter.
You should be the presenter now.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I'll be going over an introduction to the site-specific plan amendment process and to comprehensive planning, and then give a brief overview of the nominations submitted in the Mount Vernon district. So what is the comprehensive plan? It is a decision-making guide, not the law. It is created with extensive community input. It addresses multiple elements, including land use, transportation, housing, and environmental preservation, among others, and it is a long-range vision. When the Board of Supervisors authorizes staff to begin work on a planning study or amendment, it gets added to the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program. The work program contains a list of all ongoing and pending planning studies and plan amendments that the county is working on. There are generally 4 types of plan amendments: countywide and policy plan amendments that affect the entire county, area-wide planning studies for large areas such as the Richmond Highway Corridor and recent Embark study, board authorized amendments that are initiated at any time and have their own unique schedules, and plan amendments initiated through the SSPA process. Tonight, I'm going to talk specifically about the 2019-2020 South County SSPA process. The site-specific plan amendment process is a planning exercise that provides an opportunity for anyone to nominate a land use change to the comprehensive plan for a specific site or a collection of parcels. SSPA is a 4-year process divided into 2 2-year cycles. The North County, which comprises the 4 supervisor districts located roughly in the northern half of the county, Sully, Drainsville, Hunter Mill, and Providence, and the South County, which comprises the 5 supervisor districts located roughly in the southern half of the county, Springfield, Mount Vernon, Mason, Braddock, and Lee. The North County cycle began in 2017 and resulted in 4 potential amendments being placed on the work program. The South County process started in the fall of 2019. This is the guide to the South County SSPA process that was published on the SSPA website at the beginning of the nomination period in September of last year. The guide contains detailed information about the process, including the nomination form that nominators use to submit proposals for land use changes to specific sites and our collections of parcels. The SSPA process itself has 3 main phases. The education and nomination submission period is 3 months. This is the time during which people may submit applications called nominations to propose amendments to the comprehensive plan. During this time frame, the nominations that are submitted will be checked by staff to make sure they meet the eligibility criteria and to correct any errors on the nomination forms. Nominations that meet the eligibility criteria, which we will get into in a minute, will proceed to the screening period. The screening period is 6 months. This is when the district supervisors will appoint community task forces to perform a high-level review of the nominations and provide recommendations to the Planning Commission about which nominations should be included on the work program. The Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on the nominations and provide their own recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, which will then approve the revised work program. Nominations that pass through the screening period are added to the work program and will proceed to the impact analysis phase. The impact analysis phase is 6 to 9 months generally, depending on the complexity of the nominations, and this is again done by both the community task forces and staff who make recommendations to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Nominations that are adopted by the Board of Supervisors will become part of the comprehensive plan. The key objective of the SSPA process is to engage the public, which happens at each phase. As I said earlier, the SSPA process is a planning process. The planning process is the first step in a larger cycle that we call the development review process. The other stages of this larger process take place after the planning process and include the rezoning process, which defines the legal use of land and the parameters for the layout and form of a specific use. So the community screening process, which we are in now, is when the task force and staff develop recommendations for each nomination. These recommendations are simply whether each nomination should or should not be added to the work program. If the recommendation is that a nomination should be added to the work program, then that also means that the task force and/or staff is recommending the nomination for the next phase of the process, the analysis phase. The South County SSPA guide contains the justification criteria that the task force and staff should consider when deciding what type of recommendation to forward to the Planning Commission. Nominators should also explain how their proposals meet one or more of these criteria in the justification section of the nomination form. This slide shows some important milestones in the screening process. As you all know, the screening phase was originally scheduled to begin in February of this year, but due to the coronavirus outbreak, was postponed until an alternative to in-person task force meetings could be developed. During the summer, it was decided that these meetings would be held virtually, and the task force meetings were scheduled to begin at the end of July and run through the end of September. At the end of the task force process, the Planning Commission will hold public hearings in November to take public testimony, and then hold a markup session in December to create a revised 2020 comprehensive plan work program. The Planning Commission will then forward the revised work program to the Board of Supervisors, who will adopt the new 2020 work program in January of 2021. So Why do we do planning? Planning helps provide our community with long-range guidance for land use, development, transportation, environmental protection and preservation, and other policies. The plan is a guide, not the law. It contains recommendations about land use and other topics. The comp plan map shows generalized land uses for the county's land area. Zoning, again, is the law and implements the comprehensive plan. The zoning ordinance contains standards for uses and regulations for setbacks and building height, as well as other items. The zoning map shows specific zoning districts for the county's land area. The comprehensive plan includes several components. The policy plan contains Board of Supervisors' goals and objectives to guide planning and development. The county is divided into 4 area plans, and the area plans contain planning districts and community planning sectors that have more detailed guidance that address the goals of the policy plan. Special areas contain more detailed guidance for areas such as the Tyson's Urban Center or the Richmond Highway Corridor or transit station areas and community business centers. The plan map depicts, again, general land uses, densities, and intensities for the county's land. The transportation plan map, bicycle master plan map, and trails plan map are administered by the Department of Transportation and depict planned roadway, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian facilities. The plan glossary is a list of terms used in the plan. The policy plan contains these different elements. And again, these address the entire county. The concept for future development depicts how the county's mixed-use centers that are planned to accommodate new growth. These include the Tyson's Urban Center, suburban centers, community business centers, transit station areas, and industrial areas, and represent approximately 10% of the county's land. The yellow and green areas are the county's suburban neighborhoods and low-density residential areas, where little to no change is planned and represent approximately 90% of the county's land area. The blue areas are large institutional areas outside of the county's jurisdiction and include Fort Belvoir, George Mason University, and Dulles Airport. And the white areas represent other municipalities and include Arlington County, the cities of Alexandria, Falls Church, and Fairfax, and the towns of Clifton, Herndon, and Vienna. As mentioned previously, the comprehensive plan has unique geographies. Each of the 4 plan areas is further divided into 14 named planning districts. The 14 planning districts are further divided into community planning sectors. Each sector has an alphanumeric identifier and a name. These maps may also show the names of special areas that I mentioned earlier. As previously stated, the plan map contains generalized land use and density and intensity recommendations. The plan text found in the 4 area plans may contain more detailed land use, density, and intensity recommendations than the plan map depicts, and also include options for higher density or intensity development not shown on the plan map. If there is a conflict between the plan map and the plan text, the text recommendations overrule the map recommendations. There are a variety of common terms used in the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. 2 of the most common terms are density and intensity. These terms refer to the quantity of development. Density is used when discussing residential development. There are 12 density ranges that are used in the comprehensive plan. Non-residential use is expressed as intensity as defined by floor area ratio, known as FAR. FAR is a simple calculation of building area over land area. As an example of a common FAR, a neighborhood shopping center is generally about 0.3 to 0.35 FAR, and for office development, above a 1.0 FAR will require decked or structured parking to fit all the development on the site. And the same FAR can take different forms on the ground. This is just an illustration of that. This slide, excuse me, has a number of resources for information on the comprehensive plan, where to get news and events about ongoing planning efforts. And for additional reinforcing material related to this presentation, please visit the 2019-2020 South County site for a video that summarizes the SSPA process, and the SSPA education and frequently asked questions page, where you can find pre-recorded presentations on a number of topics and fact sheets that cover such things as FAR and density. Any questions at this point? Okay, then I will just give a quick overview of the nominations received. So we received a total of 26 nominations for the South County process. 4 of the nominations were rejected, and the Mount Vernon district received 8. And in the Mount Vernon district, they're clustered in the Huntington Transit Station area, along Richmond Highway, and then there is one in the Bellhaven area and one in the Lorton area. And in the Lee district, there is one nomination along Richmond Highway, the Beacon Hill Apartments. This may be of interest. Now, this is going to be reviewed by the Lee District SSPA Task Force. But if the Mount Vernon District Task Force wishes staff to provide a presentation or further information on this nomination, we can do so.
This is Gretchen. Yes, please.
Okay, and then this is the track nominations page that we mentioned before. And this is where you can look at all of the schedules for the 3 different districts and see all of the nominations and at which meetings that they will be presented. Okay, so now I'll turn it back over to the task force chairs for a discussion of the task force procedures.
Commissioner Clark, at this point, I'd like to provide some overview of the roles, responsibilities, and meeting procedures for the task force, if I could.
Yes, sir.
Members of the task force, you should have received a document entitled Mount Vernon District Task Force Nomination Screening, Roles, Responsibilities, and Meeting Procedures. It is also available at the SSPA Track and Nomination webpage. In this document, briefly, I'll provide a brief summary from some of the highlights of this particular document before I ask for your support as our governing document for this process. The task force membership, including appointment of the co-chairs, is established by the Mount Vernon District Supervisor. And during the Planning Commission screening, the task force is responsible for reviewing the Mount Vernon District SSPA nominations and making recommendations to the Planning Commission about including those nominations as submitted or as modified on the Comprehensive Amendment Work Program, or excluding those nominations from the work program. The nominations that are added to the program will move forward for additional review. The task force is considered a public body under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and members of the task force and meeting procedures are expected to abide by the requirements. Of specific importance is the requirement that any assemblage of 3 or more members of a public body engaged in a discussion of public body business is considered a public meeting of that body and must be open to the public. In the decision-making process, the task force and Department of Planning and Development staff will also make separate recommendations for the inclusion of a nomination on the Comprehensive Plan Work Program as submitted or modified, or by exclusion. The vote does not need to be unanimous. A simple majority vote of task force members assembled will constitute their recommendation. Regarding meeting information, the task force will review the nominations over a series of meetings, which will be conducted via WebEx unless in-person meetings are resumed. Regarding meeting procedures, the meetings will be led by the task force co-chairs. The first meeting will include a vote to adopt the task force procedures and appoint a secretary who will be responsible for filling out the task force voting reports for each nomination as each vote is taken. The secretary is responsible for securing the signature of the co-chairs on each task force voting report. As Commissioner Clark noted with the opening of our meeting, at the beginning of each meeting, the co-chairs will need to make certain findings and declarations in order to conduct the meeting electronically. Regarding the presentations for the process, the Department of Planning and Development planner will present the location and context and property subject to the nomination, as well as the adopted plan recommendation and the proposed change. That preliminary staff report may take up to 5 minutes. The nominator will present the nomination, as well as the justification and other relevant information about the nominations. That may last up to 8 minutes. Members of the community may express their views on a nomination following the presentations, and each individual may have up to 3 minutes. At their discretion, the task force co-chairs may elect to adjust or limit the public comment period and individual speaking times. In addition, the public may provide their comments to the task force by submitting letters or pre-recorded video to the supervisor's office. That email address is mountvernon@fairfaxcounty.gov. Deadlines for comment are provided on the SSPA website. The task force will discuss the nomination for up to 10 minutes. At their discretion, the task force co-chairs may elect to adjust the timing of the discussion. Following the presentation and discussion on each of the nominations, the task force will take a preliminary vote on each nomination for the inclusion on the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program as proposed or as modified, or for exclusion from the Plan Amendment Work Program. Discussion of all task force business, including the merits of individual nominations, should take place during task force meetings to allow all members to benefit from hearing the same information. Task force members should refrain from substantively discussing the details of nominations with nominators or with staff or other task force members outside of regularly scheduled task force meetings. Final discussion and votes on all nominations will take place at the final task force meeting. The vote shall be taken by audible roll call. And with that, I move that the task force accept the roles, responsibilities, and meeting procedures for the Mount Vernon District Task Force process as outlined in the document with the same title.
Second.
Do we hear a vote from the task force members? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Is there any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, Mr. Chairman, the motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. So now we will review, I believe we have Aaron, you're back on deck here as we talk about the item for Bellevue Shopping Center nomination.
Sure. We have received a request from the nominator to defer their presentation from tonight to another night. And so I would like to turn it over to David Gill, the nominator for the Bellevue Shopping Center nomination, to address that issue.
Sure. Really appreciate the introduction. My name is David Gill. I'm a land use attorney with Wire Gill, representing the owners of the Bellevue Shopping Center. And to be perfectly candid, as many may know on this call, Bellevue had a fire several months ago at the end of the year. And then, as importantly, since our nomination was initially submitted, we've also been facing COVID. And to be perfectly frank, we have not had a chance to focus on what that really means for the shopping center. COVID's a complex issue. It impacts our tenants differently. And we've been more focused on getting folks back into their space, getting the space repaired, and have not had the chance to think about how COVID would impact what we're thinking about for this site. As some brief background for everyone on this call, we, and as many know who are on this call, we were able to meet with, I think, 5 separate community groups, including Mount Vernon's both transportation and land use committees, as well as several of the community groups. We had 4 additional ones scheduled, which got canceled because of COVID, and have not had a chance to reclaim those as well. So at this point, we got roughly 3 weeks notice for this meeting. And to be frank, I just don't think we've had a chance to focus on it in a way that I think would have an effective discussion for everyone. Long term, our goal is to figure out what's right for this center to be the living room moving forward. But what that means as far as retail does require us to put some more thought into it and possibly even evolve the nomination from where it stood pre-COVID. This is an important site. You can see on this aerial here that it is surrounded by a lot of really well-established and well-regarded communities that really do appreciate the retails there. We want to keep those qualities, but make sure that the retail can still be there for years to come. So with that, I do really respect everyone's time and would like us to be able to come back on the September 15th is what Aaron had told me we might be able to discuss this, understanding that that gives us a drop dead date to focus on this now that we're through sort of the worst with our individual tenants and can focus on the longer term future. Thank you.
Mr. Gill, it's Commissioner Sargent. A couple of questions.
Yes.
First, and I'd like to check with staff first. Regarding the deadline for submission, is September 14th sufficient time to turn this around for staff?
This is Graham Owen.
Excuse me, August 14th.
So the last available task force meeting is on September the 15th. In order for staff to produce a revised staff report, we would need a revision from the nominator by August the 14th at the latest in order to provide our update to the task force and to the vote.
Okay. Mr. Gill, is that deadline feasible?
We'll make it feasible. I think we didn't appreciate that we really were mobilizing on this, and appreciate that opportunity to think more thoughtfully about how this site can work. I mean, to be perfectly frank, I think we know where we need to evolve given some of the feedback from the community, and we're going to roll up our sleeves and see if we can't get there.
A couple of other questions. Given to flesh out what is needed for staff to be able to complete the work, and part of it based on some of the initial description of the application, some issues there. Do we anticipate density changes from the range that had been previously discussed?
I think that's absolutely on the table given the feedback we've gotten from the community today. I think there's certainly some concerns expressed. You know, our goal with the nomination is always, what can we do to ensure the viability of this site as a retail site in the future? Retail is changing considerably given how we are living and interacting with retail, and it's changing day by day right now. Our goal had always been to be part of an iterative process with the community. Unfortunately, I think there are sometimes limitations in this process where you're forced to put something down on that form, and it's got to be tested. And you know, and I certainly understand where those concerns were raised by that, but I think your expectations are right, Tim, that's our goal when we come back in. And just to put some dates on it, staff's told us August 14th is when they would need any revisions by, and we'll certainly hit that as well to give them adequate time for a September 15th discussion.
Thanks. That leads to another question. Given the reconsideration that's undergoing with the applicant, do we anticipate a change in the mix of what was previously presented? I'm trying to get to that, not to highlight the nomination at this time, but to highlight the amount of work that will be needed by staff in terms of its review. So do we anticipate a significant change in the mix from residential, retail, or other?
Yeah, again, you know, our hope was to be able to get into the work program and figure out what the right mix was for residential versus retail, and to have that discussion with the community and have it be an iterative process. You know, what are the elements of a viable community shopping center moving forward post-COVID? I think the densities in our nomination, to be frank, will have to be evaluated pretty closely given the feedback we've gotten to date. And I think staff understands that as well.
Okay. And finally, I know there were my understanding there were some issues or questions related to the RPA and stormwater management. Are those being considered within the updated nomination?
Absolutely, and that's one of the first discussion points we heard when we met with the community. We heard it loud and clear. You know, this is a 1960s era asphalt shopping center that this owner has owned almost since the inception, and they want to be part of this community for the next decades to come. Part of that is having the right tools in place to address issues like RPA and flooding, which are not only on this site, but throughout the community, something that we hope we can frankly improve with a potential application like this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gill. As I mentioned, the reason behind my questions was to, determine the ability of the staff to complete a comprehensive nomination report in time, and that information could be provided to them by August 14th in time for a September 15th meeting. So they would have enough time to thoroughly analyze the nomination. With that said, if I could hope the task force will entertain a motion to defer discussion of this particular nomination until the September 15th SSPA meeting. If I can make that motion and get a second, I would appreciate it.
I would second that.
Do we have do I hear comments from the task force? Favor or against? All in favor of the motion?
I'm in favor of deferring it. This is Hillary.
Okay, thank you. Other task force members, are you in favor of deferring until September 15th?
You know, this is Ellen. I guess I'm a little skeptical that I'm just skeptical. So I hear where they're coming from. I hope that staff would have enough time, but I'm not really for postponing. It's just me.
Okay, thank you.
This is Queenie.
Yeah.
Would the community be able to comment during the period of this deferral?
The community can certainly submit comments. What we're waiting for is an updated nomination so we have the most current information. But yes, public comment is certainly welcome during that time.
Okay.
So just want to make sure all in favor. I've heard one nay.
Commissioner, sorry, this is Graham Owen with the staff. I just wanted to point out, we received a couple of comments in the chat function for members of the community. It's regarding public comments at this. Just wanted to raise the task force's attention.
Oh, okay. Would you like to share them or?
Oh, it's just asking in particular if they can ask questions of David Gill at this time.
I think that's part of what we're trying to do is provide the most accurate description of their presentation, since it is obviously changing at this point. To consider something now may not provide the most recent demonstration of what they're planning to do for the site. That's why we were trying to hold off conversation tonight until we had a thorough and final nomination draft.
And we received one additional comment asking about how community members can submit comments. I'm happy to take that. A number of ways that.
If you would, please, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of ways that people can get involved in the process and can participate. The first is by sending in your comment letters to the Mount Vernon Supervisor District's office email address. It's mtvernon@fairfaxcounty.gov. Additionally, if this meeting, if this matter is deferred, then there will be a chance to have public comments during that presentation when the task force reviews it. Also, you can ask questions of planning staff. specific questions that you have on the nomination. And additionally, there will be, as Aaron had indicated in his presentation, the task force is one step in this process where the Planning Commission will, in November, consider all the nomination public hearings prior to the adoption of the new work program by the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
The goal is to get the most complete information available before discussion and consideration. And right now, we do not have that for this particular nomination, which was the reason for delaying conversation until we do have the information, so you can make it as accurate a recommendation as possible. Do we hear any further motion in favor? Should we do an individual count? Because don't really want to proceed till we're sure that the task force members are okay with the motion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have a question based on a comment from a member of my community. So
Okay.
if the staff gets their revised nomination on August, when will their new nomination be, published to the community? Because I think if we all just hear it on September 15th without seeing anything ahead of time, there is no point there can be any thoughtful discussion, especially the community members. So how are we going to handle that?
Good point. So, Graham, can you answer that for us, please?
So I think in the intervening time period, the task force is okay with deferring this matter. I think that we have 2 weeks before we would require or would need in order for staff to process the change and update our staff report to reflect the nomination that's being presented. So during that intervening period of time, members of the public could comment on the original nomination while it's being, so that if there are concerns about the nomination, that those are reflected in staff's considerations and can be prepared for the task force's consideration. Once the vision has come in from the nominator, if the task force is on board with that, then we can forward those comments to them so that they're aware of them as well. So they're staying in speed.
I don't have any problem with that.
I'm sorry.
Can I? I'm not sure how to speak. Can I raise my hand?
So, America.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure I like the idea of you saying you would be doing public presentations during the 2 weeks while the Planning Commission is reviewing it?
No. So during this period, the nominator will be working to get their nomination to staff by August 14th. But during that period, public comments can be sent in to the Mount Vernon District Supervisor's Office to have and to be published and for us to consider when it comes time to hear the presentation on September the 15th. But I believe Ellen's question from one of our constituents was, once the nominator provides their report to staff by the 14th of August, so Graham, when will staff publish its report for it to be reviewed by the public?
I see. Yeah, I don't have the exact time frame. We could probably commit to, my guess is about a week prior to the task force meeting. Whatever revision that we receive from the nominator, we can publish, on our website so that members of the task force have it, of course, once it's made available to us.
Okay. So Ellen, does that answer the question?
It does, and I guess if it's published as soon as the staff receives it, and everybody, including the public, has a chance to look at the revised nomination a month ahead of the September 15th, then I guess I'm okay with that, as long as it gets published right away. The staff recommendation, if we get a week before the meeting, that's fine, but I want the whole information out there.
So I guess the question for staff is, can you feel comfortable committing to a week before the September 15th presentation, Dave?
I think we can do our darndest. Yeah, we've done that for all the nominations so far, as we've gone through the task force meetings, and we can do our best to absolutely do that.
Okay.
Mary,
Tim?
does that satisfy
Tim, this
your
is
question?
Gretchen. I have a comment.
I'm sorry, who's speaking, please?
Gretchen?
Gretchen, go ahead, please.
Yeah, here's my concern. These folks knew they were going to be presenting before the SSPA. COVID, regardless, you can still have these conference meetings all the time. So I don't understand why they're not ready now when the SSPA process got even moved back a month. They've had an additional month to be ready. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Hey, I'm wondering if we could ask folks to mute their, we're getting a lot of background noise, which is making it difficult to hear everybody. I'm wondering in between comments, if you could mute yourself and then when you're ready to speak, unmute. That would be helpful. Great, that helps a lot. Okay, thank you very much. To Gretchen's comment, question, would anybody like to answer? Would the applicant nominator like to answer, Mr. Gill?
Absolutely. And Gretchen, to be perfectly blunt, we found out about this meeting at the beginning of July, so the week of 4th of July. So it's not like it was out of nowhere. We were absolutely teed up and prepared to go forward pre-COVID with the SSPA process as our nomination was defined. As I said, we had meetings teed up with 3 additional HOAs, had met with 5 up before that, and we're going to get those in before the scheduled SSPA task force meeting. When everything got put on pause, it was very unclear when things would start up again. And we got this notice at the beginning of July, things were starting up again. At that point, we were focused on our tenants. It has been a very tough time at a shopping center to keep tenants in spaces and focus on what they were doing. We certainly heard the feedback from some of those initial community meetings and wanted to make sure we had a chance to touch base with folks again before coming to the task force, because we understand how this process is an iterative process and wanted to be able to participate in that fashion. That's all we're really talking about. And one of the texts was Bellhaven Citizens. Yes, Bellhaven Citizens was one of those original meetings.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification. This is Gretchen.
This is Queenie. Can I?
Go ahead, Queenie.
Can I ask David, how many of the HOAs are in support of the nomination that you met with, and how many were opposed to the nomination that you met with?
I mean, I certainly think that everybody has questions when you're talking about a shopping center and what the development is going to be. Again, all this plan amendment process does is get us onto a work program, which is then another 2-year study to look at whether or not the comprehensive plan should be even considered for future modification. Our nomination was solely, and it's still intended to be, retail is facing a challenge. This shopping center is going to face a challenge in the next 20 years. We put in something with residential on it because we think that's one way to look at it. We heard certainly from the community there were concerns about that, and frankly, just want to have a chance to respond to them. I don't think a formal vote was taken either way, but absolutely when there is development proposed on a site that folks are used to as a shopping center, there's going to be concerns from the community. I won't deny that.
Well, what were their concerns?
I think Tim just touched on them. You know, there's always going to be concerns about traffic. That is an area that has, with the parkway on one side and Bellhaven on the other side, traffic is always a concern. Floodplain RPA issues were raised a concern. How the heights and transitions would work, absolutely concern. And those are all issues we want to roll up our sleeves and have the chance to tackle with the community, because I think those are valid concerns.
I can answer. One additional concern was the intensity of the park, the 1.2 to 1.5 FAR. The surrounding communities, my community and River Towers behind us, are at 0.3. We are a suburban neighborhood, and of course the townhouses and the detached houses are below 0.1. So it just really does not fit in with a suburban neighborhood at all, and I don't know how they could get it down to that and make it work. That was the basic, when we had our town hall meeting consensus.
That's accurate, absolutely.
How much
I'd
time?
like
Can
to-
10 minutes.
Can I comment?
Okay, we're going on, let's get one more comment, and then we're getting on to 10 minutes within the discussion of, of whether to defer it. So,
Okay, I'd like, my opinion is that a week of the public having both the revised plan and the staff recommendations is not long enough. I would like to see it pushed up a little more so people have a little more time to absorb the new plan and the planning staff position on that new plan.
So, Graham, if you could clarify again, it's on the 14th of August when Mr. Gill gives his presentation. Will it immediately be on the website for the public to view while you all are working on your recommendation to be published on a week ahead of time?
Right. So if we receive a revision on August the 14th, we can post it as soon as we receive it. It's just assuming that everything's complete and that it's, still providing the information that's required for the process. We'll put it up as soon as we receive it. Our recommendation, our staff report goes through an internal review process before we publish it. Hence the lag time that we need in order to put it out there. But we can do our darndest to put it up at least a week in advance, like we have with the other nomination reports.
Right. So that nomination is out there already. So what we'll be looking, so the public can be looking at the nomination that's currently there, and then be on the lookout for the revision that will be forthcoming after August 14th. So it sounds like that gives us enough time to look at whatever revision that Mr. Gill will be providing us. And then we have approximately a week to look at the staff's recommendation before this body convenes again and have a further discussion and hear the actual final presentation from Mr. Gill and his client.
That's correct.
That
That
may be enough time for us to look at it, but it's not much time for the public to review it.
Agree. Yeah, because how would the public know that there's a revision, and wouldn't the nominator need to go back to those HOAs to get their buy-in?
This is Hillary. If there's a substantial revision, it seems like it might be a new nomination, and I'm starting to wonder if this should go into the next cycle rather than trying to squeeze it into this cycle to give everybody adequate time to do the studies they need, engage the community. Granted, COVID is a hardship and things are changing, but that's true for everybody.
I think part of our objective was to make sure that you had a chance to review it with revisions in it, assuming it's coming forward. We wanted to make sure you saw it too, in addition to the public. And there are different ways that this could go forward, but hopefully we could go forward with your input.
Well, our input should be partly predicated on public input. If we're talking to people in the community, we want them to also have an opportunity to review both the developers' plans and the planning committee, planning staff's comments on those plans.
We're not making this. Okay, I think we need to kind of wrap up and probably do an individual tally of the votes on the motion to reschedule to September 15th, to defer discussion until September 15th. So what we'd like to do is ask individual task force members to say yay or nay to the motion to defer discussion until September 15th. Can we do that? Then we can figure out where to go from there based on this vote. Okay.
Okay, so I'll do the roll call here. Tim Sargent,
Yay.
Walter Clark, yay. Hillary Clausen,
Nay.
Catherine Ward, did she join us?
This is
Gretchen
Gretchen. I have her by phone.
Yay.
Catherine says yay.
Okay, and Gretchen Walt,
Yay.
David Levine,
Yay.
Holly Doherty,
Yes.
Evan Kaufman,
Yay.
Mary Payton. Mary Pat?
Mary, are you muted?
I'm mute.
Yeah, nay, no.
Nay. Thank you.
Queenie Cox,
Nay. Nay.
Ellen Young,
Nay.
Amit Munir, he didn't join us. Lynn Pascal,
Yay.
Tracy Wood,
Yay.
non-yays, and 4 noes.
All right, so the motion to defer discussion on the nomination until September 15th has passed. Thank you all for a very thorough discussion on this issue. It's far from over, but we appreciate your consideration in this matter. All right, thank you all very much. We're ready to move on to the next agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Gill, and everyone. If we could take a moment, Co-Chairman Sargent, and go back, we read the task force roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
And one of the things in there, we are supposed to select a secretary who would record our votes during the session. So is there a nomination? So I've just recorded our vote here tonight for this, for the Bellevue Shopping Center discussion that we just had. So I've made the recording for this. But going forward, we need to have a secretary for each of our task force meetings.
Would somebody entertain a motion to nominate a secretary for the task force process?
So I'll nominate Tracy Wood.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second, this is Gretchen.
What say you, Tracy?
That's a good question. What say me?
Let's just, Tracy, the pay is adequate. Let me put it that way.
Big fat zero, right? Okay, yeah, sure, no problem. Thanks, Holly.
Thanks, Tracy.
All right.
All right.
We have a motion to nominate Tracy Wood as our secretary for the task force process. And we have a second too. Do all in favor of nominating Tracy as our secretary say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Hearing none, the motion passes. Tracy is our secretary, and you can all expect Christmas cards from her later on for this nomination. Thank you very much. All right, thank you, Mr. Jim.
All right.
Next on our list.
So next is Popkins Lane nomination, 2806 Popkins Lane.
All right. And so
we ask, sorry, just to interrupt for a second. We ask everybody to put their speakers on mute. Thank you very much.
All right. So the next item, as you mentioned, 2806 Popkins Lane. This is going to be led by Cedric Suzuki with the Department of Planning Development, who's going to give a staff overview of the nomination. Cedric, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, phenomenal.
Aaron, you're echoing because you're in the same room, so you might want to turn your thing off really quickly so that we don't hear that echo.
Just your system. Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. I'm here to talk about, sorry about that. I'm here to talk about site-specific plan amendment nomination PC 19 MB09, which concerns property located east of the Richmond Highway corridor along Popkin Lane in the northern portion of the Mount Vernon Supervisor District, as highlighted in the graphic that you see on your screen. The subject site is developed with a Verizon switching station and vacant wooded land which fronts onto Popkin Lane. Properties to the north and west of the subject site are located within the Memorial Heights neighborhood. These properties have been developed as single-family detached homes and are planned at an intensity of 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre. However, many of which are developed on smaller lots. The areas to the east of the property are generally planned for residential uses at 2 to 3 dwelling units per acre. However, a community of townhouses has been planned at an intensity of 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre and developed at an intensity of approximately 8 dwelling units per acre. This community was approved consistent with the site-specific plan recommendation for residential use at 5 to 8 dwelling units per acre, providing all units for moderate income households, and with proffers approved with the rezoning case, ensuring that the homes would be sold at the moderate income housing level and that a recreational area would be developed for the residents. This site-specific recommendation was removed from the plan during the Planning Horizons effort in 1991 due to its implementation. The property immediately south of the subject parcel and Popkins Lane has been planned for institutional use and developed as Bryan High School. The current comprehensive plan recommends, as part of the plan recommendation for Memorial Heights, that residential infill should be developed at an intensity of 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre and be compatible with the surrounding land uses. The plan map shows a density of 2 to 3 dwelling units per acre at the baseline level. The concept for future development designates the subject property as a suburban neighborhood. Suburban neighborhoods contain a broad mix of residential densities, are planned for little to no change in land use, and recommend that infill development be of compatible use, type, and intensity with the surrounding areas. The subject nomination proposes to retain the existing switching station on approximately 1.3 acres and subdivide the remaining 4.2 acres for the development of townhouses at a density of 5 to 8 dwelling units per acre. The nomination cites the proximity to the Beacon Grove Community Business Center, the development style of the townhouses to the east, and need for housing in the county as justification for the request. Staff's primary consideration when reviewing this nomination is that the proposed density is incompatible with the surrounding residential uses, except for the property immediately to the east, which was approved in part due to the significant commitments to affordable housing. The proposed density would be higher than the surrounding planned densities and the majority of the existing uses to the north, west, and east. Countywide policies support considering increased density in certain locations to encourage the development of affordable units. Absent site-specific plan guidance, however, the proposed density on the subject site would not yield a unit count that would ensure commitments to the provisions for affordable dwelling units, and the location in the suburban neighborhood would not ensure commitments to workforce housing. Lastly, depending on the proposed point of access, the site location is either at or slightly beyond a half-mile travel distance from the nearest planned bus rapid transit stations, which is considered by county policy the maximum optimal distance for transit ridership. For these reasons, staff recommends that PC 19 MB009 be added to the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program, with consideration for a significant percentage of affordable and workforce units in the development. While the adopted plan currently recommends a residential density on the subject property that would be consistent with the planned densities to the west, and would transition to the lower densities generally located to the east, the achievement of other county policy objectives, such as affordable and workforce housing, through the proposed increase in density warrants additional consideration of the nomination. Compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods, including Memorial Heights and access from Hopkins Lane, should be carefully considered during the review. And that's it. Any questions?
All right.
Yeah, this is Lynn Pasco. I have a question on the affordable housing. We've got North Hill that's going to be a very large development of affordable housing in the neighborhood. What do you really mean by consideration for significant percentage? How much is that over the norm?
Lynn, this is Graham. One thing that in terms of the site, I think as Cedric was mentioning, the site and the proposed use wouldn't automatically trigger either the affordable dwelling unit ordinance provisions or the workforce dwelling unit policy that's in the comprehensive plan, outside of having some site-specific guidance that's developed during the work program implementation phase. So we put that in there in our staff recommendation specifically because we wanted to ensure that that issue was brought up because with a unit count of 33 and being outside of a development center, you wouldn't have an expectation of doing affordable units. So the standard thing, if you were in a development center for WDU right now would be 12% commitment. And then depending on the number of units and where you are in relation to the plan maximums, it could be a range. So the significant contribution, what we were thinking about, we were hoping that it would be something that's certainly in line with the expectations that have been set on other sites. But the actual number, we thought that we wanted to ensure that the task force could consider that as a part of the plan amendment. So we don't have a specific number, but we should be significant.
Well, it seems like to me you're heading the neighborhood in a direction with it so close to North Hill. That's the reason I raised the question. North Hill has some large number of market rate townhouses too, of course. And the question is I'm just trying to get at what your percentages you're thinking about. Significant to me, I don't know what it means. That's all.
Sure, and we understand that. We haven't studied a specific number or anything like that, but we just wanted to make sure that that was a consideration for the task force. So we've raised it as an issue and kind of a rationale in staff's mind for potentially adding it to the work program, but the exact number is...
Excuse me, I don't understand what you mean when you say it's not eligible for workforce affordable housing, and yet you say it might have some. What is the market rate rents projected to be in there? And what do you mean by workforce area units? I can't understand what you mean when you say it's not eligible for these policies, and yet you hope it'll have some.
Sure, Mary. So the terms that we're using, affordable dwelling units and workforce dwelling units, those are terms that mean different things, but in both
Yeah, I know
instances,
exactly what they all mean. I just don't understand what you're saying.
Sure. So affordable dwelling units, generally, you only see affordable dwelling units that are components of developments that have 50 units or greater, depending on the construction type. Workforce dwelling units are trying to achieve a different goal in terms of the populations that are being served, but in both cases, they are committed units that are provided to individuals or families with median incomes that are at specific percentages. So in the comprehensive plan with workforce dwelling units, you only have that expectation that workforce dwelling units be provided when you're in development or in areas where higher density is planned. So this being a suburban neighborhood, you wouldn't automatically have that assumption. WDUs would be expected with the development unless there's specific guidance that's provided in the comprehensive plan, for example, through this process. Does that answer your question?
No, I don't understand. Are you saying that because they're kind of smaller units or sort of missing middle type of housing that they won't be very expensive? at a market rate, or that they will have some committed units?
What I'm talking about is the commitment. So if a nomination proceeds and they get a plan amendment, unless there's site-specific guidance in that plan amendment language that talks about EDUs or clear affordable dwelling units, if they go to do a development project in a rezoning, then there wouldn't, all things being equal, proffer commitments that would ensure commitments towards ADUs or WDUs. So it's looking a little bit further down the line.
If I could interrupt for just a second, do we have, this is Tim Sargent, do we have a presentation by the nominator?
We do, and I think a lot of the questions that folks might have might be answered by them so they can explain their nomination.
The task force process incorporated about 10 minutes for task force discussion following presentations. We've used some of that up, but we'll extend it. Just wanted to make sure we got all of the presentations so the task force had as much information as possible before its questions. If it's with the consent of the task force, we'll go ahead and ask the nominator to deliver their presentation, then we come back and follow up with some questions. Is that okay? Okay, hearing.
Yes. Commissioner Sargent, this is Sherry Aiken. I'm here and ready to do a presentation.
Okay, great. 8 minutes, you're on.
All right, Sherry, I just made you the presenter. So if you want to share your screen or share your PowerPoint, feel free.
All right. Can people see it at this point?
We see you.
Not yet.
Not yet?
No.
All right. I have not seen you give me the controls. Graham.
Sherry, do you have the share content button enabled? It's right next to the video one to the right.
I do now. All right, so hit share.
Yeah, and it'll let you choose what screen you want to show.
Excellent. All right. Is a PowerPoint up now?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Again, my name is Sherry Aiken, and I'm a land use planner with the law firm of McGuire Woods. And it's a pleasure to present this SSPA nomination on behalf of the property owner, Verizon, Virginia. A very good summary of the application was just presented by staff, and this is a somewhat simple request. So in the interest of time, I'll try not to restate the specifics, but I will touch upon the basics and benefits of the proposal. So the first slide shows the existing Verizon switching station. They own the 5.5 acre parcel, and it was originally approved for a switching station back in the 1950s. Since that time, less than 2 acres has been needed for the telecommunication use. As such, Verizon would like to subdivide and sell the approximate 4.2 acre surplus property at the rear of the site. Here is an aerial shot showing the approximate subdivision line that would occur. In 2015, Verizon did go through the special exception process and gained approval, which permitted a reduction of the land area for the telecommunications use. Their original approval said that this entire property had to be telecommunications use. So knowing that they did want to sell the surplus property, we filed the SE to remove the surplus property from the restriction that it had to be telecommunications and could be developed with residential. And during that SE process in 2015, we had numerous discussions with the community who of course had their concerns, but overall did not oppose the concept of residential homes in the back portion of the property. In fact, they did see some benefits that would come out of the redevelopment. For instance, there is some type of drainage issue that occurs along this side of East Lee Avenue. Paul Springs Branch runs through this northwestern portion of the property. So a future redevelopment would be able to address those drainage issues by providing appropriate and modern stormwater management controls. Also, we were advised by the community that people do go back here and loiter. and conduct other problematic activities like drugs, that sort of thing. So the community was supportive of some type of development that would eliminate what goes on there. The problem since 2015, quite frankly, is that the comprehensive plan language limits this to 2 to 3 dwelling units per acre. And developing with single family homes only allowed about 12 lots, which after the stormwater management and the new roads and the amenities that they would have to put into that type of development, it quite frankly, not one developer wanted to develop. They couldn't make the numbers work. So here we are today. Again, as staff described, the zoning of the surrounding neighborhoods reflect the stable residential areas that are in the comprehensive plan. To our west and to our north is Memorial Heights, zoned R3. The Woodlawn subdivision to our northeast is also zoned R3, but to our immediate east is that small 14 townhouse development that's zoned R8. And the properties to our south are zoned R2 and developed with public and private uses. I did go around and look at the different housing stocks in the area. Here are some shots on Popkins Lane, which is zoned R3 for the housing residential portion. There are a variety of houses. Square footages range from really anything, but generally, looking at the tax assessment records, they're about 1,500 square feet to 3,200 square feet homes. I had trouble getting pictures on this street, by the way, just because of all the trees. So sorry you can't see anything specific. But the tax assessment values are in the $400 and even the $600,000 range. This is that small 14-unit townhome development immediately adjacent to our site. It is zoned R8. There are 14 townhomes that are range from about 1,200 to 1,900 square feet. Those tax assessments are in the high twos. And then East Lee Avenue, which is a part of the Memorial Heights subdivision and dead ends at the Verizon residue property. Again, these are those stable neighborhoods with a variety of square footages ranging from 1,400 square foot homes to 2,800 square foot homes. Tax assessments range from the upper threes to the mid four. Preston Avenue, same thing. This site dead ends at the Verizon property. Again, these are the stable homes and they range from 1,300 to 2,200 square feet and similar assessments in the upper threes to the mid fours. And the last two streets I wanted to show you, Woodlawn and Groveton. They also abut the Verizon property and are zoned R3 with similar square footages and assessments that I spoke about. But what I did want to point out to you is that something I saw in these areas, and you can see in this picture on Groveton Street, there are several homes that are redeveloping. They're either putting additions on or are possible tear downs. And my point being is that there is a variety of housing types in the area, some of which are staying the same and some enlarging and evolving. This last slide I'm about to show you, I need to stress it's a concept only. As a nominator for this SSPA, I'm representing Verizon, and I want to point out that we do not have any contract purchasers at this time or developers that we're working with. In fact, the property isn't even on the market at this point in time. Staff asked us to try to put a concept together that could show how it could work. During the 2015 rezoning, we had a concept that showed the 12 single family lots, and we did show access off of Preston Avenue, which the community was in agreement with. But again, the slide is conceptual in nature and only meant to show how a townhouse community could fit on this property. As you can see, there are 33 townhomes shown, which would fit in that 5 to 8 dwelling unit request. And it's actually the 33 is at the upper end, 8. what could actually go here. You know, a developer would have to engineer and figure out. This, again, is conceptual in nature, but our engineer kind of picked a middle of the road townhouse size and tried to capture the roads that would be necessary, the stormwater management that I spoke of that would be necessary in this area, as well as some type of residential amenity, all of which would be required when a future developer does come in, and they would have to go through a rezoning, and all of this would have to be added. So that's really about it. This is a simple application request where we're just trying to bump up the density from 3 to 4 to 5 to 8. And it will help finally develop this vacant parcel of land and provide the much needed housing stock for this area. It's also in close proximity to Richmond Highway. And I would like to thank planning staff for their review of this proposal and their recommendation that it moves forward to the work program for further discussion. However, I do need to state that we are not necessarily in agreement with staff's recommendation that language be added requiring a significant percentage of affordable and/or workforce dwelling units. That type of language will pigeonhole the site and could very well inhibit future development, exactly what the existing comprehensive plan language does. And as I mentioned, this area is evolving, and we do not know at this time what the market or what the area will demand for the site in the future. There are many factors that go into the ability to provide affordable and workforce housing units, and there are established county programs and policies for the provision of ADUs and WDUs. No doubt a future developer will negotiate this with county staff, the community, and the decision makers during the rezoning process. And we get what staff is saying, that this size property and a 5 to 8 dwelling unit at 33 units, it's not going to trigger the ADU requirement because it's under 50 units. But again, we're going to be in a rezoning process, and all of this can be discussed at staff. And the comprehensive plan language is clear that ADUs and WDUs are important goals for the county. And again, that all of that can be brought up in a future rezoning and discussed with staff. Staff obviously took that language from the Bryant Town Court rezoning that is immediately adjacent to that site. That site was rezoned in the 1970s, and there is a proffer that required that they be developed and sold at a moderate price range. I read the transcript for that hearing, and there was considerable angst even at that time about what was appropriate in that regard. And it was a time period that certainly was a precursor to the ADU and WD policies that we currently have. It was so clear that it was becoming a goal of the county, but they just didn't have policies in place that really could establish it. And I think that's why that proffer was established. But if, as you know, as you heard staff say, it was also taken out of the comprehensive plan in 1991. So the county's process in the 70s was to focus and provide moderate priced housing for, and the transcripts say, teachers and police officers. And it was interesting to even say that they thought the moderate housing was in the 40,000 to 80,000 price range. So in the late 70s, it's quite different than what it is now, and the pricing has changed considerably. But at any rate, the county policies and regulations have evolved for very specific reasons and purposes, and a future developer should be subject to those established policies. Again, the language suggested by staff could inhibit development of this property, and there may be better language that could capture the county's ADU and WD goals, which I point out are in the comprehensive plan, and a future developer in a rezoning would need to address them. And I think we could further this discussion during the work program. And with that, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Sherry. I'll turn it over to Commissioner Clark for.
All right, so let's open up to the task force for questions. Are there questions for Ms. Aiken?
Hi, this is Catherine, and I do have a question. Sherry, I know this is.
Sorry, this is Graham. Catherine, I'm just noting that you joined late, so just wanted to ensure that everybody on the task force could hear your voice, just in line with the findings and declarations that were.
Yes, I'm aware. I was listening in on the phone before.
And Graham, if I could ask a quick question, just because I am not sure if I am on video or my PowerPoint's on video.
Yeah,
It is currently, it looks like you're sharing your screen, and so we see your PowerPoint now. But every time that you change change to a different browser or a different application, we can see that.
All right, well, I don't know how to go back.
If you want, we could, yeah, well, I can reclaim presenter permissions if you'd like.
Okay.
Am I allowed to go ahead and ask my question?
I stopped sharing, by the way.
Yes, go ahead, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. Sherry, you have mentioned that the property is not on the market as yet. What we're noticing because of the revitalization that's coming along Richmond Highway, albeit slowly, landowners are being very unrealistic in their sale prices of properties. So things don't ever happen anyway. So is Verizon going to be somewhat realistic when they decide to sell? And that's just a comment. I'd like them to be realistic. And then the other thing is, I agree with you on the removal of the language because I think it removes any flexibility a potential developer would have. It also removes any flexibility for those who live in the community to help fashion what should happen in their neighborhood. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Catherine, to answer your question, I think Verizon would be very reasonable in who they're going to work with and who they're going to pick to develop. And during any type of rezoning, as you know, a future development has to be in keeping with the area. So I think all of that can be vetted during a rezoning. And this language is simply allowing that our future rezoning to occur.
Anyone else?
This is Queenie. And I guess my concern is the increased density, that it's going to more than double. And that will have a significant impact on the community.
There, no doubt, it would increase density. I can go back to show you that zoning map, but up and down Route 1, Richmond Highway, there's been rezonings that have been upwards of R20. And there's just been a variety of rezonings as this area and the Richmond Highway corridor have evolved. There are several choices a future developer could look at in terms of appropriate road connections, and a traffic consultant would have to be worked with during the rezoning. And again, your concerns are real, but they're more appropriate for the rezoning process when an application. And with a range of 5 to 8, that 33 number could go down depending upon what's needed for that property.
Excuse me.
Well,
Sherry,
I guess my
just interrupt, if we could ask everybody who's not speaking to mute their speakers, please. Great, thank you. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I guess adding to my concern about the increased density, and even to piggyback on what Catherine Ward said about the property value, for the sale, is that it appears that a lot of developers are coming in right now, and they are definitely taking advantage of the BRT stations that will be close, to property that they own. And so that's going to increase the property sale, and at the same time increase, more traffic and the community. that's why my concern is more than doubling the density.
Well, the comprehensive plan language now is 3 to 4, and it has a specific next level, which is 5 to 8. So I don't have a lot of options in what I can request. I have to go up to 5 to 8. So I don't know if staff wants to address that, but again, even though the plan language set would say 5 to 8, if this SSPA did get approved, again, a rezoning would have to be submitted and reviewed by the county and vetted through the community and the decision makers. I mean, it also would have to be engineered. That 33 lot concept plan that I showed you, we have not engineered what would be required for stormwater management or what would be required, all the different requirements in the zoning ordinance for a new community. So it could very well change. It could be less, it could be more, but the purpose of this plan language really is just to up it and allow for future rezoning to go in where the number of units would certainly be scrutinized.
Let me just say, having looked at the site, it seems to me that the argument against this no man's land or no woman's land by the neighbors has got to be a strong one. And I think it makes development of a place like this, it's just sort of held there. It's not a park. It's not anything else except space right in the middle of a lot of people living in a nice community. I'd be very concerned about it if I lived in that area. And I think that's a strong reason for going ahead with it.
So this is Holly Doherty. I remember when we dealt with this parcel back in 2015, and I'm just not clear on what it is that's being asked of us tonight. This is not a rezoning. What is it that's being asked?
Brand, did you want me to take that or did you want to take it?
Yeah, Holly. So what we're dealing with right now is just the question of whether or not this nomination, which Sherry has put forward, should be added to the comprehensive plan work program. That's the phase of SSPA that we're in right now.
Just further study on this site. Okay, that's fine.
It's just whether or not this should be authorized as a plan amendment. And when I say that, not approved or adopted as a plan amendment, but just to be studied further.
That's fine.
If it is added to the work program.
That's fine, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question. As you've developed this kind of conceptual plan, what kind of square footage and purchase prices are you envisioning in the townhome community? Is it comparable to the surrounding neighborhood in the high 30s to 4,500 range?
At this time, I really couldn't say. Like I mentioned in my presentation, Verizon is not working with any type of developer, it's not on the market. So we were hoping to get the comprehensive plan language changed to show not 3 to 4, which limits which limits it to single family homes, but up it to the 5 to 8. So we could put a little bit higher density in there and get a developer to consider redeveloping it and filing a rezoning. So what they would do, I think they would have to engineer it to fully understand how many units could go there.
Okay. Well, I would favor more density in that area because it is near the Beacon Mall, the Beacon Hill CBC, but I would like to see it in a comparable price range to the surrounding neighborhood or even less since it's more dense. So I don't know what our committee can do to influence that, but I think density is good. That's kind of a small pocket of density, but it's near a place with transit. So I think that would be a good place for it.
I think we could look at language as we go through. If this moves forward to the work program, that could address that concern. I think that's probably in keeping with what the county would want as well.
I mean, we could use more affordable home ownership options as well as apartment rentals.
And no doubt that's true. And even though this property is so small that even if it could be developed up to 33 units and it wouldn't trigger the ADU, there are proffers that are required, and a future developer would need to contribute to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund if no units were developed here that were affordable or workforce housing. But again, all of that can be negotiated and discussed during a rezoning process.
Okay, task force.
But the problem is, to me, that contributing to the trust fund is that it would not alleviate the problem in the South County area here. Because as I understand Mary, she's looking for relief for like the police officers, the teachers, and everybody else in this area. But if the money goes out of this area, it doesn't benefit. It doesn't benefit the ones that want to live here affordably.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we have questions in from the task force, I'd like to now we can open it up to the public to ask questions or have comments.
Right, so we have a number, this is Grant, we have a number of attendees that have raised questions in the chat function, but if people want to speak, now is the time for members of the public to raise their hand. So if you wish to speak on this item, there is a raise your hand button that's in the participants panel. So I would just invite you to raise your hand if you wish to speak on it. All right, we have one for Sarah. So Sarah, you are unmuted, Sarah. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I virtually live right across Richmond Highway from Hopkins Lane. And one of the concerns that I had is there any planning that is involved in this, or will be possibly involved in this to address choke point?
Sarah, your volume is very low, and I don't believe that we can all hear you. Did you say?
Is that better?
It is.
Okay, so I live right across Richmond Highway from Hopkins Lanes, and one of my concerns would be the choke point of Hopkins Lanes once you enter onto Richmond Highway. It is a no right on red. Is there any plans with this development that might alter that light?
So Graham, I believe under the Embark plan that, if I understand the connection there, Hopkins Lane, Richmond Highway, that traffic light, where we have the two lights that are there together, one of those lights should be going away. That intersection is going to be a change, if I remember correctly from Embark.
Yeah, I can look.
And could I ask another one that goes right with that? It's a question, as I looked at the thing, I wasn't even sure it has access onto Hopkins Lane, does it?
So this is one of the things that staff had raised in the staff report as well, which is the access. And there is a question whether access is best taken off of Hopkins Lane or whether it's taken off of one of the two cul-de-sacs that goes into the Memorial Heights. Staff preference would be that it be accessed directly off of Hopkins Lane. That way you don't have spillover traffic into the Memorial Heights neighborhood. There is that kind of outstanding question about the Verizon switching station and how that might interface with that. But this is a comp plan exercise, and entitlements flow from the comp plan. So that just a bit of a perspective there. With regards to the right turn lane that's on Richmond Highway at Poplar. Those kinds of elements would certainly be studied as a part of the plan amendment to see if there's some sort of mitigation or change to the road network that's required to either accommodate the development or to just respond to it. So that's the kind of thing that would be certainly looked at during the work program implementation phase if it's added to this, to the work program.
Okay, other comments from the public?
Just a reminder to other members of the public, if you have a question, now is the time to raise your hand. And you can do that by pressing the raise your hand button in the participants panel. And I'm not seeing any additional public comments on this.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a motion?
Are we done with discussion? Yes, Holly, but I wanted to make sure we're done with discussion. No further questions from the panel?
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we accept this nomination to go forward into the work plan.
This is Ellen. I'll second that.
It's been moved and second. Any further questions? All in favor?
I have a question. Okay, never mind.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Nays? Any nays? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Great.
Could I make one additional comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I didn't raise it a second time, but I still have problems with the staff report that is so vaguely throwing out this question of affordable housing. It seems to me that somewhere, if you're writing something like this, you've got to be much more specific what you're really talking about. And I agree, and I think this should go forward, but it's not clear to me, and I think it's a very precedent to just throw out very generalized statements like the one that's on the staff report.
Lynn, I appreciate that, and I think we should amend the motion to remove that language from the staff report.
So there's recognize of a friendly amendment to the motion. All in favor? Second. All in favor?
In favor.
And any nays?
Nay.
It's one nay. Motion carries.
Oh, well, I'm late.
So I think that was our last nomination and presentation. For staff, is anything further asked of the task force, or are we ready to adjourn?
Oh, no, we don't have anything further. We'll work with the secretary to ensure that we have the vote. And this is the first SSPA task force meeting. Preliminary votes on each per the rules and responsibility. And the final vote, just as a clarification, the final vote taken at the meeting on the 15th. So I don't have further direction or comments at this time unless anybody has any questions.
All right. Meeting adjourned.
Good work, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.